Welcome to the HR Congress podcast. My name is Ben Churchhouse, and today I'm joined by Max Hunter. Max is the founder of Max Hunter & Partners based in Hamburg. He specializes in creating high-performing teams of motivated individuals. Max is also the creator of the Roots and Fruits methodology, as well as the organizer of Hamburg Ignite. He is also a regular speaker, trainer, consultant, and commentator in the HR world. And Max will be joining us at the HR Congress Nice this November to present a masterclass, which is entitled Ignite, How to Create a Motivated Workforce That Drives Business Results, which we'll get onto a little bit more later. And you'll also be the track chair of the Talent and Culture track. So it's my pleasure to welcome you along today to the podcast, Max.
Hi, Ben. Thank you very much. It's great to speak to you again.
Of course, as always. So given that you were a speaker at the previous HR Congress last year, and the fact we did a podcast previously as well, what have you been up to since the last HR Congress, and what were some of the key messages or takeaways that you took away from that event?
Since the last HR Congress, life's been very busy, both as Chief Joint Officer at Loylogic, where we've launched a new onboarding tool, which is engaging and fun, as you may expect from us, and also very informative and educational. So we've launched that, and in the rest of my time, which is the majority, I've been helping organizations from startups in Barcelona to multinationals in Germany to really do everything from help them with leadership training through to running big events and longer term culture projects. So it's been a very busy year. I look forward to the HR Congress again to kickstart more new stuff. My biggest takeaway from the HR Congress last year was, for me, the messaging around when I talked about my role as Chief Joy Officer, which is a C-suite role, helping the organization to create a motivated workforce, a place of work, which is my vision, where people wake up on a Monday morning and can't wait to go back to work, right? Of course, that gets everyone nodding. Because that's been my job, and only that, I realized that the HR community was very impressed that such a role existed without having to deal with legals and payroll and compliance, but also to an extent a bit jealous in a good way, right? In terms of, it's probably the reason that they went into HR in the first place, was to make a difference to the places that we work. And I know HR is on a big movement right now, quite rightly, to get more into that space or to reclaim that space. But really, that disappointment, I suppose, that HR hasn't always had the chance to do that, and gets very much bogged down with being given the shit from management to handle and deal with, as well as the admin stuff. And I inspired a few people, and hope to do so again, to really find out how HR can take that space again, how to communicate it, and to give them some tools to really be able to speak to senior management again.
I totally have forgotten to mention that you are still are the Chief Joy Officer at Loylogic. I should have mentioned that in the introduction. But of course, your job, your role, at least from what it sounds like as an outsider, is the kind of idealistic version of what I'm assuming many HR people would have thought about when they went into HR in the first place. And there is obviously a romanticized pull towards that. But on the flip side, as you are correct, there is definitely a reinvigoration these days about the employee experience side of things, the culture side of things. But for the benefit of those that haven't heard our previous podcast or weren't at your previous session last year, could you please quickly explain the Roots and Fruits methodology again?
Sure. So as a combination of my time as a business leader, which I was for 14 years, before I moved into the Chief Joy Officer role, and then through my experience as Chief Joy Officer, the things that we tried, the successes that we had, the learnings, let's call them failures, that we had as well, I really started to crystallize what are the keys that drive motivation for people at work? What is it about the environment? What is it about the work that drives that? And I distilled it into the 4 keys, which I distilled into the Roots and Fruits. And they are that I belong, that sense that I'm part of the tribe, I like the people I work with, but also that we're pulling in the same direction with a common goal and purpose. So that's I belong. Then there's I am seen. That's all about this feeling of being recognized for what I do and appreciated for who I am. which is often massively underplayed in the business world, as I'm sure we can all relate to. The third one is it's my thing. And that's all about that. I simply love what I do. I love the content of my day job. I get in the flow with what I'm doing. Plus, as a consequence of being the expert in that area, that I don't get blindly overruled by hierarchy, which is what kills innovation. And the fourth one is I'm growing. That need to have new challenge and have the support to achieve it. I'm constantly developing on my personal and professional path. So that's the four things. I belong and I am seen. I call them the roots, that which binds us to where we are and what we do. And it's my thing, and I am growing as harvesting the fruits of my labor. So therefore, hence why it's called the catchy roots and fruits. And really, whenever I present it, whenever people dig into it, they really start to give them a framework to start to understand and realize what are the drivers of their individual motivation, but also what they can do within their business environment to make a difference.
Yeah, so obviously motivation is something personal, and it should remain a core component of how you progress through your career and your life. Obviously, having personal motivation is very important, but how influential is organizational culture on employee motivation?
I think I simply probably have to remind the listeners to think back to times in their working life when work was great, when Monday mornings they looked forward to them, and to think back on times in their life where Monday mornings or even Sunday evenings, they were filled with dread. And in both of those examples, if people want to pause and think for themselves, there's a huge component of what the organization's like. In fact, in the experience I have of taking people through that exercise, 90% of the reasons for those feelings are because of the organization. Because of their boss, because of the conditions, because of how they're recognized, because of the teamwork or otherwise, because there's silos. So many reasons come to mind immediately for people that I would say, yes, of course, individual motivation is different. But when people answer those questions, they see, of course, immediately the interconnection between the organizational culture and how motivated they were, and therefore, of course, what impact they could have on the business as well as on those around.
So what are some of the ways that you would suggest HR leaders to go about getting executive and or C-suite support for initiatives around building motivation? Because my initial biased reaction is it sounds a little wishy-washy. It's a little bit sort of hard to pin down, hard to define. What would be your advice in this area?
Yeah, so first of all, to get their attention, okay, they hear about culture or VUCA or agile, or there's all this stuff going around, new world of work, and as you say, it becomes not very tangible for them. What I mentioned before is the key, first of all, to get them listening. Do you believe that if you've got a workforce full of people who are looking forward to going to work on a Monday morning, that's good for your business? And of course, everyone nods. Well, of course, if everyone can't wait to get back to work in an exaggerated case, then yeah, of course. Okay, so then it's all about the employee experience. And I think employee experience is a slightly more tangible kind of buzzword. It's about what's it really like to work here. Then I strongly recommend doing some discovery phase. It's what I do with a lot of organizations, where you spend time listening in to people across the organization, different levels of hierarchy, seniority, length of time, departments, etc. And then you can play back to the leadership, what are some of the pinch points, and with stories about this is what you're doing, or this is the environment we have, and here's the impact it has on the business. Now, of course, if you want to, the Roots and Fruits framework really help to make that a bit more concrete. In fact, we even have a survey that's in behind it to diagnose and then propose. But either way, once you can paint it with real stories based on that discovery phase, then you start to prick their ears up, right? And because it's real, and it's a real impact on the people, but also on the business. And that's when you make it tangible.
So what is the evolving role of people and data analytics in creating high-performing teams?
Well, as I kind of mentioned earlier, until you've diagnosed the situation, you can't come up with the right solutions, much like a doctor, right? If he hasn't diagnosed the condition properly, he's prescribing the wrong medicine. So people analytics can really help with that. Of course it can. The data to understand where people are at. Of course, the analytics around levers, of course, and the costs of that, etc., is clear. But the data analytics is vital. What's more important, and I do actually have a 10-year background in customer data in my previous life. Data on its own is nothing. Data with insights, you're getting somewhere. And data with insights and recommendations is, of course, the different ball game. As we used to call it, the what is the data, the so what is the insights, and the now what is the recommendations. So yes, you need the data to do that, to at least have the what. You then have to have the skills and ability to turn it into the so what and now what. And what I find super important now, as I mentioned earlier, is the storytelling. So numbers can only give you so much. And at some point, the way that the human brain takes in information and makes decisions is largely through storytelling. So if you can use the data to trigger some stories, to then say, okay, we see that this is happening, let's get some stories out of the business that can paint the picture of what that truly means, that's when the data and analytics starts to become super valuable.
So let's cast our eyes ahead to the Talent and Culture track at the HR Congress this year, which you'll be chairing. What are some of the topics in that track that you are looking forward to discussing? And what would you like the attendees to engage with or maybe prepare for?
Well, first of all, they can certainly prepare for it to be engaging and interactive. My style to track, moderate is very much to make sure that the crowd is engaged and there's energy in the room. So be prepared for that, I think, first of all. Apart from that, I mean, I look forward to the diversity. We've got a great diverse range of topics, speakers, companies, industries, everything from, as I mentioned before, the power of storytelling and cultural change. So I really look forward to hearing about that for sure. Siobhan McHale's talk about the truth about culture change and how to make it happen very much implies that the truth may not be easy for some people to hear. And then, of course, fantastic things around the evidence on the cost of not closing the gender gap. So not just wouldn't it be nice, but there's a cost to it as well. That could be very helpful for people to take back to their organization. And Ricardo Troiano's talk about customer centricity as the driver of organizational agility. So that comes to the bit about I belong and purpose. If we're doing it for the customer's sake, suddenly we'll probably realize a more intrinsic agility to make sure that we drive the business forward.
And of course, could you please tell our listeners a little bit more about what they can expect from your masterclass at the HR Congress this year?
For sure. I look forward to that very much. The workshop environment is one where I very much thrive. So I look forward to kind of welcoming a fantastic bunch of people, I'm sure, and again, making it very interactive and engaging. They can expect to learn about the roots and fruits methodology in a bit more detail, so they can work out how they can take that back to their organization, but also even start to get a view of where they have strengths or weaknesses within their organization. They can expect to exchange with other peers in the room. I will be making space for that as well, so that they can take back something concrete out of it as a first step to take into their organization. And as a part of that, I'll also be giving some very helpful hints and tips, as we mentioned earlier, on how to get senior business leaders to listen, to make sure that the great ideas have a chance of getting implemented.
So how can people reach out to you if they have any questions or they want to get in touch?
I'm probably kind of busiest on LinkedIn. So if you type in Max Hunter, if in doubt, the Chief Joy Officer as well, you'll definitely find me on LinkedIn for sure. And of course, all my details are there. More about what I do, but also more contact details on our website, www.maxhunter-partners.com. And yeah, please feel free to reach out. I'm always open. I always love sharing, exchanging, hearing more from like-minded peers. So I'd very much look forward to hearing more from people.
Thank you for taking the time again to do this today, Max. I know we sort of had a bit of a rescheduling challenge there a few times, but thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I'll look forward to seeing you again in Nice very soon.
Me too. All's well that ends well, Ben, and I look forward to seeing you in Nice soon.